Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. Hope everybody's having a great week so far. We are here for our weekly What is in the Stack? Only one guy and a stack of comics this week. Mike is still a little busy and indisposed, but that's our stack for the week. Obviously, as soon as Mike can be back on these, we'll always have him on as many videos as possible. But wanted to make sure we went through the best and most notable comic books of the week. Talked about some of the highs and the lows for both Marvel, DC, and a couple indie books as well. And so the starting point for this week, I think the most notable book that came out was Ultimate Spider-Man number 16 from Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cicchetto. Uh, this book is a rather interesting one, and I'll kind of make sure I preface it by saying there's going to be spoilers as to what happens in the issue and overall the changes in the story that happen. And I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know whether I loved or hated this issue. I think it's really just going to depend on how you feel about what this does. But it is certainly a game changing issue. And so in the issue, it is largely told from the perspective of Gwen Stacy. Kind of picks up here after what was allegedly, Harry's funeral. And the rest of the story is basically reframing the events of the last, 12 or 13 issues since Gwen was introduced, kind of showing from her perspective. In the end, the major sort of revelation that takes place in the book is that Mysterio, who in this book had yet to be unveiled, is actually Gwen, who is one of several people who seem to be part of this kind of like cabal of individuals who inhabit the Mysterio persona. And so it reframes a lot of the events. Gwen's support of J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben's newspaper seems to be part of a larger plan that she's had to try to undermine the Maker, and that Gwen is one of a few people in this universe who seems to be aware that the Maker rewrote the universe. And so it's a huge game changing kind of swing. I do think it's a well drawn book. I think it's a well illustrated book by Cicchetto. I think they did a great job with all of that. I think the execution of it is decent. I will say though, I just don't know if I like the change, and I think for two reasons that I'm not a huge fan of this. And I say this as someone who loves the Ultimate Spider-Man series, has been, on board since day one, who is a huge fan of Jonathan Hickman's. I think it kind of leans into two things because there's two revelations in the book. We start with the Gwen Stacy as Mysterio piece of things. Well, it is a necessary change up, I think, to kind of give the book a little bit of juice. And I think, part of the fun of an Ultimate Universe is to sort of put the players on the board in a different way. It leans into that everybody in Peter Parker's life is something, right? It's either a hero or a villain or something like that. And I do just miss sometimes there being civilian characters in Peter's world. And so her being Mysterio, I guess it could work depending on how you feel about the story. I just think this is one of the first changes that's happened where I do think it's a risk. It's a big swing, and I think it's all going to depend upon the execution of the next few issues and how they reframe it. I don't necessarily love it. I don't think it was awful. I think, we certainly saw in the previous issues Mysterio was acting a little weirdly and was involved in that Craven's kind of hunt sort of issues where it made it seem like Mysterio is more of an ally for Spider-Man. So I do think it makes some of those things make sense. But I don't know. I think it's a first time in a while I've read a comic with a reveal where it didn't shock me, but it was more just I don't know if I hate or love this. And so I'd be interested to see for those of you who are reading Ultimate Spider-Man how you guys feel about it. The part that I did not like at all, and again, it makes sense because of Mysterio's presence in that story. We kind of see that this was in fact Gwen who killed Craven. We see that the Harry Osborn death was actually a fake out. That Harry is not actually dead, and that basically they're just going to go with the public persona of Harry Osborn being dead, and kind of going from there. Um, while I don't mind Harry Osborn being alive, and I enjoyed his presence in the book, it's another comic book trope thing, and I get that these always happen, but I do wish they had actually taken the gamble and killed off Harry. To do another reversal of a death again. I thought Ultimate Spider-Man was actually taking some major swings with that Craven story. And so now retroactively it kind of makes that story not as important. And I'm just not a fan when comics do that. I think, certainly it's not the most unexpected thing because Mysterio's presence, making it an illusion, all that could certainly make sense. But I just don't know. I'm not a huge fan of when they reverse things like that. I thought it was really cool that they took that swing and there was going to be some stakes to it. Instead, okay, everybody's back on. Yeah, the board shifted a little bit, but it's an interesting issue. I'd be interested to see how folks feel below. Again, I think it's not a bad issue. It doesn't make me, at all waver in terms of liking the book or anything like that. I just don't know overall if that's going to hit for everybody. I know for me, it just hit me a little bit weird. But still an interesting issue, and I'm still on board for Ultimate Spider-Man. But I think that's a change that could turn off a lot of readers, or could drive re-engagement for folks. But I'd be interested to see what you guys think below. The other comic I thought was sort of notable this week, and not in a positive way, is Fantastic Four 31. This kind of does a couple things I really don't like. One, the cover's a complete and total lie. This sort of frames that Fantastic Two, that only Breed and Sue given their power, shows them fighting alternate dimension versions of themselves. That never happens in this book. Not a huge fan at all when covers that aren't variant covers, massively mislead you. But my main issue with this is the portrayal of Ben Grimm in the story. And Ben Grimm is an interesting character because he's been around for so long. He's had such a distinct personality. And in this book, because of the events of the One World Under Doom, where Doom forcibly took away Ben's powers and turned him back into Ben Grimm, this entire book deals with them trying to go to different multiverses without changing things to have Ben get re-exposed to the cosmic rays. In that, a couple years ago, they established that if one member of the Fantastic Four loses their powers, all of them have a fluctuation in their powers as well. And so the beginning portions of the issue kind of show Johnny and Sue and Reed losing their powers a bit. I don't really know. I know that was a change from a couple years ago. I didn't like that when that happened. I still am not a huge fan of it. I think it's way too coincidental or just kind of weird to have them connected in that way. My bigger issue with this book is there's two things that they have Ben Grimm doing in here that I just don't seem in character with him. One, they kind of emphasize at the beginning that Ben is, and this is kind of some of the art here from Corey Smith, and I think the art is pretty good. They have Ben sort of really struggling with not being the Thing anymore, which I think could make sense, but they're just over exaggerating it where he's seeking therapy and going through different things. It's like Doctor Doom rules the world. Ben Grimm, you would think from how he's been established to be with somebody who'd be, even as Ben Grimm, still finding a way to fight back. And instead, the last issue had him weeping and going to Puppet Master and having him like change his personality. And it's just a weird change to Ben Grimm's character. It feels like they're trying to do some sort of thing about trauma with Ben Grimm. And while I don't think seeking therapy is a weakness for anybody, it's just not Ben Grimm. That's not who this character's been. This character has been through so much over 60 years in this comic book that to have that this is the moment that kind of completely breaks Ben Grimm in this way, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The other part is at the end of this book, while they're traveling to these multiverses, they have Ben rather selfishly kind of here go in and he changes the coordinates to where the Fantastic Four, the original incident where they get their powers. And he gets his powers back, but he actually ends up taking away powers from the rest of the Fantastic Four, who by the end of the issue start to disappear. And so, again, it just doesn't seem like Ben Grimm. Having Ben Grimm be secretive or having Ben Grimm do something that could put his family in jeopardy knowingly, it just doesn't seem in character with him at all. And I think this has been something that's been interesting with this series that Ryan North's done, is that the first 20-ish issues of Fantastic Four I thought were really strong. There were a lot of isolated kind of one-shot issues that I thought really explored some cool things with the Fantastic Four, multi-dimensional stuff. Had almost a Star Trek kind of vibe to it, and I really liked that out of the book. The 25th issue was a disaster, and I think since then the book has just kind of gone downhill in it. The characterizations feel a little bit off, and while I've enjoyed the One World Under Doom event, I think this spinoff and what they're doing with the Fantastic Four just doesn't hit. I just don't like when they take a character like Ben Grimm, who has been through as much as Ben Grimm is, and they treat something that happened in the book that, let's face it, he's lost his powers multiple times before. All of a sudden, we're just supposed to buy as an audience that this is this devastating thing that he can't recover from, and that he's willing to just, completely be broken. It just seems more like Ben Grimm would be the guy like, hey, powers or not, man, I am coming after Doom. And instead, we're not getting that. And so I think it's surprising to see them make that turn with it. I definitely did not enjoy that book. Love the Fantastic Four. I'll pretty much only be reading that book, but I thought that was really disappointing to see. Next couple books I'll get through some really good books that I do think came out this week. Batman: The Long Halloween, The Last Halloween, #7. This is Jeph Loeb with Dave Johnson on the art. This is kind of the third sort of chapter in that saga of The Long Halloween and Dark Victory. It does a great job of picking up the threads from those stories, and I think this book is really just showing the strength of Jeph Loeb as a Batman writer. One of the highlights of this book to me was just the way that Dave Johnson drew, and you can tell it's his style. But what I really love everybody is doing in these books, because it's an homage really to the great Tim Sale. The art is, you can tell clearly his, but they draw the characters in the same sort of way that Tim Sale did, and you get the great, Tim Sale cover. But I think it's a great story. There's some really strong character moments in this. This is, again, kind of a long Halloween is always holiday themed for each issue. And so an interesting thing with this is this takes place in Mother's Day. I thought there's some really strong character moments where, Robin was injured in the last issue. And so they have Batman sort of training and pushing him to get back. And I think that there was just some great character moments there. I think the other part that was really great in the book is they have Bruce Wayne visit both his mother's grave and Dick Grayson's mom's grave. And the way that Batman kind of in those scenes shows his humanity, I thought was really good. I think that's what Jeph Loeb has always done a really good job of, is he's always found a way to find the humanity in Batman. I think sometimes there's way too much leniency on just making Batman a jerk. And so I really appreciate that Jeph Loeb went the distance that he did with that in this and putting some of those emotionally kind of poignant moments in here. There's a great moment at the end of Dick Grayson as well visiting his mother's grave that just it really hits well. I think if you appreciate these characters and the storytelling, I think they've done a great job with it. Sadly, this only has 3 issues left, but I would say I think this is a really strong series. Loeb is struggling a bit on the main title, but he's really doing well here in this world that he kind of created with The Long Halloween and Dark Victory. And it's great to see them honor Tim Sale with the books. So overall, I thought it was a really strong issue for the 7th issue of that series. Would certainly recommend that one for you. Last 2 or 3 here, actually about 3 or 4 more that I wanted to talk about. Another one I'd recommend, Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. This is Chris Claremont's return to Wolverine. He had a couple miniseries last year, and this has Damian Cusiero on the art. This picks up after that original Wolverine and Kitty Pryde miniseries. While I am not the biggest fan of the art that was in this book, I think at times the faces just look a little bit weird. The action sequences that are in the book, kind of like if you kind of see that there, are pretty good and dynamic. But the strength of this is just Claremont returning to the X-Men universe. I do not understand for the life of me why they don't just hand him the main X-Men book. But he does such a great job. He has such a great voice for Wolverine, for Kitty Pryde, for their relationship, for the development. It's a great throwback book. If you're, like me, a little bit tired of modern X-Men, it's really just great to revisit these characters back at a time where you really loved the characters and the stories. And so I think this is another success from Claremont on that. I think it's a 5-issue miniseries, but just love it. Price point being $3.99 too, when you're paying $4.99 for most books. Thought this was a really strong book. We're really excited to see that one. Surprisingly, there's actually 2 X-Men related books this week that I really enjoyed. Weapon X-Men, #3. Sadly, this is only a 5-issue series. It was announced as an ongoing. Somehow Marvel, despite giving all kinds of characters 10-issue stories and stuff like that, apparently the sales were really, really low on this, which I don't really know how they know that 3 issues in, given solicitations and stuff. But I think Joe Casey, who I did last week make a mistake and incorrectly attribute him as the writer of Spider-Man, when it's Joe Kelly. Joe Casey is writing this one with Chris Cross on art. This is just a fun book with Wolverine, Deadpool, and Cable. Kind of has where Deadpool sort of double-crossed Wolverine in this and turned him over as part of a contract, and then didn't realize he was working for Baron von Strucker. And so Baron von Strucker's creating these Wolverine-esque robots to attack the characters. It is a turn off your brain, popcorn blockbuster kind of thing. It's chock full of a lot of good action, some decent one-liners, and I do think Joe Casey's the first guy in a while who's written Deadpool really well. And that Deadpool is funny and obnoxious, but not over the top and annoying like he's been the last, 10 years or so. The art overall in the book from Chris Cross is pretty good. I think there's some pretty, dynamic action scenes in here and some different things that happen. I just really enjoyed this. It was a great escapism book, a great kind of action-oriented team book. Perfect encapsulation of like a summer blockbuster film where you can turn your brain off for a bit and just enjoy. And so I would recommend that one as well. Last three books that I would sort of recommend: Red Hulk #3, Ben Percy and Jeff Shaw on this. Um, Continues to be a fun book. I only bought this book. Sometimes I record in my kid's room, and so if you see some of those videos, you'll see a ton of Red Hulk stuff in there. My toddler has been obsessed with the Red Hulk for some reason, and so I just started picking up the book because I thought, hey, if that sticks, he'll probably want some Red Hulk issues. This book has actually ended up being really good. It's been a prison break story with Thunderbolt Ross working with Machine Man and Deathlock. It is a little weird that it's one of the only titles that's really ingrained in the One World Under Doom crossover that's taking place. But overall, it's been a fun book to see. It's been a fun book to read. I think the art has been really good from Shaw in the book. You kind of get a shot there of Emperor Doom. But it's a smaller still stakes kind of story, but really like it. I think the characterization of Thunderbolt Ross has really been on point. This has been a surprise book for me that seems to be really well executed and thought out. So I give that a lot of credit. Last two books that I'll sort of mention. Sometimes Marvel does have some fun, and they've been doing some of these shots lately. These Godzilla series. This is Godzilla versus Spider-Man. Takes place in the symbiote era of Spider-Man, and I do think it's actually a pretty fun book. Again, it's not exactly deep or poignant or anything like that, but Bradshaw is on the art. You just get some cool shots here, like the Venom symbiote inhabiting Godzilla in this. Overall, I think it was just a really fun sort of book. I think when you have the advantage of major companies like Disney having so many properties that they can partner with is occasionally you get stuff like this. And so I think this was a fun book. Not exactly, something where it's going to redefine your comic reading experience. I haven't really enjoyed as much the Fantastic Four and like Hulk crossovers with Godzilla, but this was really cool and explored a cool time with Spider-Man. So I enjoyed the heck out of that one. Would certainly recommend you check that one out if you just want a fun comic. Last one that I'll recommend for the week: Savage Sword of Conan #8. A lot of different artists in this. I think Culver Burnham, and the star of this one is Liam Sharp, who has a story at the end with just some of the best comic book art that I've seen in a while. This is where I really love Savage Sword of Conan. You just get drawings like that there that are just so well rendered and so well done. I think Savage Sword has really hit its streak. Mike and I have loved the Titan Comics Conan run. What I think Savage Sword has really hit its stride in the last couple issues is it's triggering a lot of really fun individual stories. They seem to be getting slightly more high profile artists and writers on these. And just the mix of the anthology nature of the book is really working. There's great prose stories in there. There's great pinup pictures. There's great kind of stories like that from Liam Sharp. I think Savage Sword has really hit its stride, and I think this was a stronger issue from it. Overall, I've really liked that. And it's great to see that Savage Sword has become a nice complementary piece to the main Conan book in recent months. So I think that was really, really good. Last thing before I go, got to make sure I get in the books that were important to Mike this week. And so for him, Facsimile issue of More Fun Comics #73. $5.99 price point on this, but really cool. You get kind of some great old adventures. There's a Spectre story, an Aquaman story, a Dr. Fate story, a Green Arrow story. Really fun to see these reprinted. And DC always does such a good job with the newsprint kind of printing of these to capture as much authenticity as possible. Thought that was a lot of fun as well. Really enjoyed that myself, but this was the big highlight this week from Mike in the comic book stack. As always, folks, let me know what you guys think below. What was in your stack? Did we miss anything, Mike and I, this week? Hopefully we'll have Mike on next week to go through what's in the stack. But as always, thank you for watching. God bless you. Have a great weekend, folks.